Welcome to the Tim Castle Live Show, where we meet courageous people doing inspirational things around the world.
All right. Well, Matt Dixon, it's a pleasure to have you here on the Tim Castle Show.
It's great to
And
be here.
yeah, I've been looking forward to this. You're one of the world's leading experts on sales, customer experience, and service. And I think getting someone like you, I know your story and your background, and obviously you wrote or co-wrote the Challenger Sale, but you've now written a new book a couple of years ago, or a year ago, called The JOLT Effect. And just the way that this book unpacks, and it's based on a lot of data, you can see it's really going to help salespeople. And I'm sure the sales that have happened of that book and how you've been in to speak to corporate leadership teams, that you've seen the effects of that book. Can you give us a little flavor of what that book's done and the concept behind the JOLT effect?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I were to step back, Tim, I would say, I think there are three big obstacles or challenges facing today's salesperson. I think the first one we wrote about in the Challenger Sale, which is really the problem of customers today learning on their own. So customers, before they meet with the salesperson, are much more likely to do their own research to think about, what are the problems we're trying to solve, who are the vendors we might partner with, how do they compare to one another, and then they kind of put that all in an RFP or a tender process, and they force salespeople to kind of compete on price. So that was really the story of Challengers, like how do we undo that? How do we get ahead of that learning journey, et cetera? We wrote a follow-up book a number of years later called The Challenger Customer, which dealt with the second big problem facing salespeople today, which is the growth in buying committees. We've seen, and I think especially since the pandemic, as more and more sales are happening over Zoom and Teams and these virtual platforms, just an explosion in the number of people showing up at the buying committee, right? The number of people who are now weighing in on the vendor's proposal. I actually had somebody told me the other day, I was interviewing an experienced sales leader from a software company, and she told me increasingly today she's finding she shows up on demos in these calls, and people, especially for enterprise clients, the people on the client side don't even know each other. So they're introducing themselves to each other on the Zoom call. And she said, every time one of them has to meet each other for the first time on my sales call, I add a month to the sales cycle. I know, it's just, it's difficult. And I think, again, since with all these sales moving to virtual platforms, there's no downside for the customer to invite all kinds of people to show up on the demo or on the pitch meeting itself, right? Which just increases the odds for the salesperson that the deal will be lost to like a lowest common denominator kind of decision, like let's stick with the incumbent supplier, let's try a little pilot instead of going all in with the solution. Like buying committees tend to be quite dysfunctional and not very good at agreeing on big transformative change. They're very good at putting the kibosh on big transformative change. We've heard the saying before, everybody in these big companies is empowered to say no, but nobody's empowered to say yes, right?
Right.
So that was the big challenge we wrote about in that book. Now, the new book, The Jolt Effect, that you asked about, is about the third big problem facing salespeople, which is the steep rise in no decision losses. So these are deals where the salesperson has qualified the opportunity. They might have even forecasted it to close because they've gotten positive feedback from the customer. They might even be working it through legal and procurement and all the sales prevention departments. But this thing is moving down the tracks, and then suddenly the customer kind of pulls up the tent stakes. They ghost you. They go radio silent, and they just kind of evaporate into nothingness. And eventually, the salesperson, either they decide to do this themselves, but more often their manager tells them to, like, all right, time out. Like, this deal's not going anywhere. They mark it as close, loss, no decision in CRM. And I think we've seen a really steep increase in these losses just over the past few years, especially in markets like tech, in SaaS in particular, a massive rise in no decision losses. We found in our research and the JOLT effect that anywhere between 40 and 60% of a salesperson's qualified pipeline today will be lost to no decision. Now, this is a problem, I think, that is poorly understood. It's a huge problem, as you can tell from the numbers, right? It's very costly to salespeople. It's costly to teams. It's costly to their organizations. It's also actually costly to the customer. If you think about all the time the customer puts in to evaluating a vendor's solution only to do nothing, it's not a very good spend of their time or energy either. But so it's a very expensive problem. It's a very costly problem, but it's not very well understood. And so we decided to study it over the span of about 18 months. We actually benefited from the pandemic. There was this, as you remember, in the blink of an eye, all sales went virtual overnight. And so we partnered with several dozen companies and we asked them, would you send us your recorded sales calls? Whether you use a platform like Gong or Chorus, or maybe you just use Zoom, and can you ask your customers, would they mind if you record the sales calls? So we had dozens of companies send us sales calls. We collected 2.5 million of them, and we used a machine learning platform to study them at scale. And we were really laser focused on this problem of, or really two questions. Why? First, why do customers make no decision? What would possess a customer to do such a thing? And then secondly, what do the best salespeople do to avoid that? And actually, we found very surprising answers on both of those questions.
I love that. I love that you hook people in with the idea of there's a way around this. Like there's the problem is indecision, or there's a no decision loss, and it's taking up between 40 and 60% of your pipeline. And instead of pretending that that's real pipeline, there's people that actually know what to do. And so that's where you created this. So the framework, the JOLT effect, came from this 2.5 million data points. And that's within your company, DCM Insights, that then it extrapolates that.
Yeah, exactly right. So we maybe I can just I'll just at a high level, I can give your listeners a sense of kind of what we found around those two questions. So the first one, as I mentioned before, this big question of like, why would a customer make no decision? It turns out is not a very well understood one. If you were to ask the average salesperson, most of them would tell you, and I heard this from lots of salespeople and very experienced sales leaders, in fact, that when a customer makes no decision, the conventional wisdom in sales is that your customer is actually making a decision. They're deciding to stay with their status quo, right? The way they do things today. Maybe they work with your competitor, maybe they have a homegrown solution. Perhaps they use your solution, but they use it in kind of a narrow way, and you're trying to get them to expand, or you're trying to expand your footprint with their organization. But that's the customer status quo. And I think the mindset for salespeople has always been, look, if a customer drags their heels, if they go radio silent, if they become hesitant, they are in fact making a decision to just stay the course and keep doing what they're doing today. And what we found was most salespeople have then been taught that the way you get the customer off the fence and the way you get them to move forward, what you've got to do is to kind of overcome their inertia and their status quo bias. And status quo bias is something that all people struggle with, right? Customers especially when they're looking at big, risky, disruptive purchases, transformative decisions and investments. They really will get in their own way. They're candidly pretty lazy. They're risk averse. They don't want to move forward. It takes a lot of energy to get a customer to move forward. It's just easier to keep doing things the way you do them today. And so what salespeople tend to do is when they see that customer become hesitant, what they almost all do, we found like 75% frequency of this, salespeople kind of go back and they dial up the FOMO, with the fear of missing out. So what they'll say is, Tim, like once I sense that you're getting cold feet, what I'll go and I'll do is I'll say, Tim, remember like how amazing your team thought our demonstration was, and remember the pilot we did for your organization, how wonderful it was. You're not going to get those benefits if you just keep doing what you're doing today. Like the only way to get all that good stuff is if you say yes. If that doesn't work, the second attempt in dialing up the FOMO is usually to increase fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So the FUD, right? So I want to put the screws to you. I want to dial up the heat a little bit. I want to say, Tim, I got to say, you were telling me that you guys are hemorrhaging money, or you're exposed to this massive risk, or you're losing market share to your competition. By the way, we work with all of your competitors and they're experiencing tremendous benefits working with us, and you're going to be left in the dust. And, and so what I'm trying to do is make you sweat a little bit, really, and to try to make you feel like there is a real cost to doing nothing. There's a cost to your inaction. And if those two things don't work, the last FOMO technique I would use is to try to offer like a 10% discount that's only good this quarter, right? So, and it's not always that, but sometimes it's a version of that. Like, Tim, I got to tell you, like, our team is so busy right now. the only window we can fit you in for our implementation team is like next month. And if you don't sign this week, I have to give that slot up. And you might be waiting 6 months. And remember, you told me your boss is like looking at you and your team to deliver. So you're going to miss your targets for this year. Now you're not going to make your bonus and all these kinds of things. So, but what was very surprising to us, so none of that was surprising, because that's actually what salespeople have taught to do for a very long time. And in fact, you mentioned Challenger earlier. Arguably, I don't say even arguably, in fact, what we did, we argued in that book that you should do that stuff, right? Challengers are very good at showing the customer there is a cost to their inaction, we said in the book that the pain of same is worse than the pain of change, right? So they're trying to break that inertia. We're trying to overcome the status quo bias. But what we found surprisingly was those techniques with customers who have expressed a desire to move forward, and then become hesitant, those techniques actually really backfire. They make things worse, not better. In fact, they increase the odds the deal will be lost to no decision. That was really puzzling to us, because it really flies in the face of everything we've come to believe in sales, and actually everything we found in our prior research. And so we dug a little bit deeper into it. Here's what we found, is that it turns out there are two reasons a customer will do nothing. The one reason is the one we're all familiar with. It's with preference for the status quo. The customer is just not convinced, right? They don't see the value. They don't see the need to change. You haven't answered the why change question. They think what they're doing today is good enough. They don't think it's a top priority. So they're content. And that accounts for a lot of no decision losses. But it turns out that's the lesser of the two causes we found. That it's only accounts for about 44% of the no decision losses we found. 56% of those losses had nothing to do with the customer's preference for their status quo or their laziness. It came down to indecision, which itself is a function of their fear of failure. Now, I find that a lot of salespeople struggle with this concept, and I hear this a lot, Tim, which is, look, I sell to CFOs, or I sell to CEOs or COOs, or these senior executives. They get paid to make the tough decisions, and here you're telling me they're just scared. That's the reason that I'm getting ghosted by my customers. And in fact, when you dig into it, there's a whole boatload of human psychology literature around this phenomenon, which is not status quo bias, which we're all familiar with. It's something called the omission bias. And the omission bias is actually more powerful than status quo bias. What the omission bias is about is trying to avoid blame effectively. So if you think about, we are all familiar in sales with this idea that people don't like to lose, right? That's why we dangle the 10% discount.
Loss aversion. Yeah.
It's loss aversion. This is exactly right. A very familiar concept to salespeople. But there's a twist on this that most salespeople are not familiar with, which again is called the omission bias. The omission bias holds that human beings think about loss in two different ways. On the one hand, you've got errors of omission. An omission is when you don't do anything. So you choose to stay with your current vendor and you don't experience the benefits of switching to a new vendor, or you decide to use your legacy system and you don't embark on this transformative change, and maybe you lose market share to a competitor. And that's painful, but that's a loss that stems from sitting on the sidelines and doing nothing. The opposite of that is called an error of commission. An error of commission is when you experience a loss due to a decision that you made. So you made a decision, and because of that decision, you experience a loss. This is very morbid, so I apologize to your listeners here, but the most famous psychology experiment that was ever run to illustrate the power of omission bias is a group of respondents were asked to imagine that they were sitting on a train platform, and they're waiting for their train, and along comes a train, and then suddenly they see that there's a group of 4 rail workers, busy at work a little bit down the tracks with headphones on. They can't hear the train coming. They're totally unaware a train is coming. And now this is hypothetical, of course, but it turns out on that platform conveniently is a lever. And if you pull that lever, it will send the train onto the opposite set of tracks, which is wonderful, because you'll save those 4 workers who are, completely unaware a train is about to mow them down. You'll send the train onto the opposite set of tracks. Unfortunately, there are 2 workers on the other set of tracks who will get killed if you pull that lever. Now, what's so interesting is rationally, you should always pull the lever, right? Because you're going to save 4 lives, but sacrifice 2. It's just math, right? But it turns out most people don't, because people are, and this is as crazy as it sounds, most people are more comfortable with being indirectly responsible for 4 people dying than being personally responsible for 2 people dying. Again, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but that is the omission bias. It is the power of not wanting to be blamed when things go wrong. Everybody's okay, sitting on the sidelines and watching loss happen, but people don't like to take action and then be personally culpable in that decision. So what we tell salespeople, the big aha here was, it turns out that while FOMO is a very powerful driver, right? It's a very powerful lever to use with your customer. It turns out the FOMO matters more than the FOMO. The FOMO is the fear of messing up, and the fear of messing up, or the not safe for Tim's show version would be the FOFU, but I'll let your listeners figure out on their own what that stands for. So, right, but the FOMO or the FOFU matters more than the FOMO. So what that tells us is very powerful. Now, let me back up because I mentioned Challenger before. What this didn't tell us, and this is really important, is that FOMO doesn't matter in sales and that we can ignore the status quo bias. If you don't answer the why change question for your customer, you're never going to have a fear of failure problem. You're never going to have an indecision problem to get that far. So, but what you got to think of as salespeople is that you've got to pass through 2 stage gates with your customer. The first one is you've got to overcome their natural inertia, their deep-seated bias to do nothing. That's their status quo bias. You dial up the FOMO, you do the Challenger thing. It's very, very powerful. But after you do that, once you've convinced the customer to change, now the customer starts worrying about what might go wrong. They know they want to buy from you, but then their mind starts swirling with all the things that could go wrong. And in our research, we actually found there were 3 big things that they tend to obsess about. The first one is, Tim, I know I want to buy from your company. I'm convinced I love your solution, but you showed me tons of different configurations. You showed me all these different integrations with other vendors we could do. You showed me how I could do it myself, or I could hire your firm to do the implementation for me. You showed me different contract lengths. You showed me basic versions and premium versions and, platinum versions. Like, I don't really know what to buy from you. I know I want to work with you, but I don't know how to work with you. So that's the first thing, is it stems from choice overload, just too many options. The second thing is customers worry about not having done enough research. And this is the problem of information overload, right? There's so much research out there. I feel like I need to be an expert before I can move forward with this decision, because what I can't afford to happen is that I get surprised after the decision is made when some new piece of information comes to light. Maybe an analyst report, maybe a competitor that we didn't talk to and we overlooked that would have been perfect for our needs. And then I've got egg on my face because I was the person tasked with doing this research. And then the third fear of failure stems from expectations overload. So this is quite literally where customers they are not convinced they're going to see the full value from the purchase. They don't know if they'll see the full ROI. They don't know if they'll see the full benefit. They will look you in the eye and say, I get it. I get it, Tim, that your other customers see a 10x improvement in sales productivity when they use your software. That's awesome. But Tim, you got to understand, we screw this stuff up every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And there is no way our company is going to realize those benefits. Like, there's just no way. And if we only come in at 8x and I built a business case for 10x, I'm going to have some explaining to do. And in today's environment, I might get fired for spending all the company's money and resources on something that didn't pan out. So I need to feel like you've got my back. Like, there's a safety net here. And we are going to overperform, not underperform. I need to look like a hero in my organization, not like a fool. So those are the 3 big fears of failure. But I think this concept of, there's a time and a place to overcome the customer's indifference. And then we've got to shift gears and overcome their indecision. And the way we really do that, what the JOLT effect teaches us, is by instilling confidence in the customer. They've made a great decision, that they've done plenty of research. And you know what, better yet, you don't need to, because I'm your trusted advisor. I've done all the research already, and I'm going to tell you what you should pay attention to and what you can ignore. And then lastly, I'm going to make you look like a hero, not like a fool. We're going to overperform here relative to expectations. So that's a hard thing for salespeople to do, who have been taught for so long to like push and push and push, that actually there is a time to push, and then there's a time to put your arm around the customer's shoulders figuratively and make them feel good about this decision they're about to make.
And that's so important. I think the bit that you just explained about the expert wanting to be the expert,
Yeah.
and actually that's something I see a lot of is just the consumption of information. You've
Yeah.
got the people that want more and more and more, because they don't feel, like you said, like if something new comes out, they need to defend that strategy internally.
Yes.
And so that's just a habit. But really,
Yeah.
it comes from that fear of messing up.
It does. It
That's
does.
literally stemming from that.
I heard a story the other day. This is a terrible story, but there was a head of sales from a kind of an early stage scale up kind of tech company, sort of a up and comer in a pretty crowded market with a lot of big incumbent players. They beat out the bigger competitors, much bigger competitors, for a huge deal. It was like tens of millions of dollars, and it was a game changer deal for their business, a multi-year contract. They fought really long. It was like a year-long sales cycle. About a month after the deal was closed and they were starting to get into implementation mode and this kind of thing, the new Gartner report came out on their space, and it showed that they were actually kind of middle of the pack compared to some of the bigger players. And then there were a couple of kind of startup vendors that this company, the customer, hadn't even spoken to. The customer ended up backing out of the contract. And what was so interesting is he told the chief revenue officer, when they finally broke the news and said, we have to walk, we can't move forward. What he admitted was that when that Gartner report came out, he was just hammered from all directions inside his organization by colleagues who said, hey, did you see this report? Like, why did we go with these guys? Because Gartner thinks these other guys are better. And by the way, did we talk to these other folks here? Because they seem to be like up and coming. I never even heard of these guys before. And he said, I still am convinced that you are the right vendor for us. Now, we did the due diligence, but I don't have time for this. Like, it's much better for me to just say, let's throw in with one of the big companies and like be done with it, and that's so painful. But you're right, it comes from that fear of failure. And I think what even more deeply than that, I think it's not just fear of failure, it's the customer's belief that they're not being dealt with in an honest way by the salesperson. So if you think about the customers coming into the interaction with the salesperson feeling like, let's say I'm the customer, Tim, you're the salesperson, and I'm coming in thinking, I know Tim is compensated to sell me as much as humanly possible. And I know the bigger the deal, the better. And every question I ask Tim about, can your technology do this? Can your product do that? Can your solution deliver X, Y, and Z? He's going to say yes. Because why would he say no? Right? If I asked Tim to introduce me to a reference customer, I'm betting he's going to put me on the phone with a customer who loves him and his product. Like, he's not going to introduce me to the customers who hate him, right? And hate his company. So I come into this believing like you are compensated and you are rewarded for basically hiding the ball from me. And so it's not only that I don't want to be surprised and I fear that failure and being surprised after the fact. It's that I don't think I can get the honest scoop from you because you are paid to hide it from me. Now, what's so interesting is one of the keys, and it sounds kind of deceptively, it's sort of deceptively simple. One of the keys to resetting that balance and getting the customer to stop trying to become an expert and start trusting the salesperson as the expert is upfront. We found gifted salespeople, these JOLT sellers, very early on, being brutally honest with their customers, saying, "Look, Tim, based on what you're looking for, I actually don't think we're the right vendor for you. I would actually recommend those guys over here. I know people over there are happy to make an introduction, but that's the use case they're really good at. We focus more over here." Yep. Or like, "Hey, Tim, really excited. You guys are excited, and sounds like everything went well. It seems like you're building your business case around this one integration. I just want to be very clear. That's brand new for us. We only had a few beta customers who are working with it right now. There have been some bumps in the road. In 6 months' time, it's going to be a thing of beauty. But right now, we're kind of working our way through this. And what I don't want to happen is you build your whole business case around that, and then it ends up being rocky, and then you're upset with us. So I don't want to disappoint you guys. I just want to be clear and honest here." Or even things like, look, I know you're looking at the premium version of the solution, and I would love to sell that to you, but I also want to be a good steward of your budget. Based on your needs, I think the basic version is perfectly fine. And you can always expand to the premium later, but I wouldn't feel good about myself if you guys went and spent money you didn't need to, right? Those moments reset the balance with the customer. And suddenly I'm thinking, I don't need to be an expert. Tim's got my back, and he's being totally honest with me here. I don't now feel like he's hiding the ball or he's hiding the dirty laundry from me. And it then gets me to say, actually, Tim, what else should I be thinking about? Tell me
You lean
more.
in.
You
You
lean
lean
in.
in. And I think that's great because it's literally the opposite of what you said was one of the biggest problems, which was driving urgency is a strategy that salespeople use, and they're going to give a discount. And so you're literally saying there won't be a discount because right up front, our
Yeah.
premium package isn't going to serve you. This is perfectly fine for you. So it's like flipping it, but because you're not doing it as a strategy, you're not faking it, you're not making this up. You're just being honest and
Yeah.
transparent and doing that authentically. So that's what you're saying you do to stop the information overload need to
I
create
think
the
that's,
person
yeah,
to go
that's a
to
big,
expert.
I think it's step one. So step one, it's like you've got to, so if salespeople want to be seen as a trusted advisor, and there's two pieces of that. The first one is you've got to be trusted. And so we just talked about that. How do you establish that basis of trust? The other one is you've got to be seen yourself as an expert. And I think this is the second thing that a lot of salespeople get wrong is salespeople, especially in technical areas, in technical domains, they end up showing up with like a clown car of experts on every single call. So they'll
Right.
show up and say, "Hey Tim, I brought like the head of customer success and the head of engineering and the head of product and my executive sponsor and blah, And then what I do is, as a salesperson, I say, "Guys, take it away." And then they all share wonderful information with you, but I kind of sit back and I'm thinking, man, like Tim's smiling and he's nodding, he's eating it up, and he's asking great questions, and these guys are just knocking it out of the park, and because they're the experts. And I'm thinking that's a good thing. But what's really dangerous about that is if all I do is punt the conversation to my colleagues, it might feel good in the moment because again, I've got the experts talking to the customer, and it's wonderful. All the questions are getting asked and answered. But something dangerous happens in that moment, which is you get delegated down to the person you sound like. And if all you sound like is a glorified, PA or glorified MC, that's a very dangerous place to be because think about it. Think about dealing with one of the other problems we talked about, choice overload. Well, the key to doing that is to guide the customer. Don't ask them what they want, tell them what they should buy. But if you yourself don't have a modicum of expertise, the customer will not really take with any credibility or think there's any credibility in your recommendations, right? You need to be seen as an expert. Now, I want to be very careful here. I'm not suggesting to salespeople, don't invite your colleagues. No, that's the last thing you should do. Nor am I saying that you need to be as deep as the engineering team on the product. However, when you bring your partners on the call, carefully choreograph that. And what I mean by that is spend some time prepping with them, which most salespeople don't do before the call, and set role expectations. And even at the level of like, Tim, you're the head of engineering, I'm the salesperson. The customer's got this question. What I'd like you to do is take no more than 5 minutes to answer it. I know you can go on for hours about that. You love this stuff, and I love you, man. And I know you want, but I need you to be really tight and succinct there. And then we're going to tell the customer you've got to go to an urgent meeting. And so we're going to let you go because I need the customer coming back to me. I can't see them as, I can't be seen as merely an MC. I need them to see me as an expert as well. And you want that too, because you don't want the customer going around my back and asking you questions directly. So that's a really, really important part of this. Don't punt the conversation. Just don't abdicate the conversation to your colleagues. Carefully choreograph it and orchestrate it. And as a salesperson, invest some of your own time, your own personal time to start to get deeper on your product. Don't just sit back up during the demo and surf the internet while the engineering team is going. Like, start to learn the talk track, start to understand the answers to those technical questions. And the more you pick up, the more you'll be able to kind of carry that baton farther into the race before you need to bring in a subject matter expert.
I love that. And I think that's really going to help a lot of salespeople who are listening to this because I guarantee the amount of people that will actually take the time to choreograph a call when they're almost like, yeah, it's just like a shoe-in, right? You've got the head of engineering coming in, they're going to do their bit, but that takes up 40 minutes of the call. So should it proportionally, and how does it dilute your influence? Like that resonates with me because I've experienced that. So I know in my sales career, I've thought I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But does the customer buy, or do they try to go round you later on? You've got all the senior stakeholders on there, and it doesn't go through. And so when they get to the end, and potentially you've got that buying signal, but they're just on the fence, indecisive. I mean, some of the stats you're talking about here, where you've got like 84% is indecisive. I think one of the things you talk about is the fact that we shouldn't think about being decisive as anything but exceptional. Like that should be not, that's like that's rare. That's
Yeah,
up
it's
here,
very
and
rare.
everything else is indecisive. So
It's
if you don't
hard.
have a strategy to deal with indecisive,
Yeah,
you're screwed, or your pipeline has got holes in it that you don't even see.
that's
Like,
right.
how do we challenge that, like with the jolt effect?
Yeah, so one thing I should say up front, because we kind of hopped around a little bit, but the JOLT, for those who've read the book, is an acronym. It actually stands for 4 behaviors: judging the level of indecision, offering a recommendation, limiting the exploration, and then taking risk off the table. We talked a little bit about that, limiting the exploration, dealing with that information overload, and you do that by, being honest and truthful and transparent, and building up that basis of trust, and then demonstrating your expertise. You're asking about one of the kind of where it all starts, which is this whole idea of surfacing indecision. You mentioned that stat before. It turns out that actually we were able to look at these 2.5 million sales calls, and we looked at it by opportunity, and we actually found that 87% of all the customers in all these calls were demonstrating either moderate levels or high levels of indecision. So exactly as you said, Tim, the decisive people out there, turns out, are the exception, not the rule. Now, here's the problem with it, is that if you ask your customers, let's say you surveyed 100 of your customers, if they believe that they're decisive, 100 of those 100 would say yes. Absolutely.
That's it. Yeah.
It's funny because people don't like talking about being indecisive. It's kind of embarrassing, right? Especially for a senior executive and an influential decision maker in an organization. This is nothing that they'll cop to, but it turns out that only 13% of the market is actually telling the truth, and the other ones are quite. Now, by the way, if you find somebody who is decisive, you should sell them everything as soon as possible. So that's only like 13% of the market. So more often than not, you're dealing with moderately or deeply indecisive buyers. And so the question is, how do you get something that we know is there? We know it's swirling in the customer's mind. It's giving them butterflies in their stomach. It's giving them cold feet and hesitancy, but they don't want to talk about it because it's embarrassing to say, like, hey, Tim, like, I'm actually my boss already doesn't like me, and if I screw this up, I'm going to get fired. Like, nobody's going to say
Right.
that. So how do you get it on the table? And it turns out a lot of the techniques that we've taught salespeople over the years, like open-ended questioning and these kinds of things, aren't particularly useful here. Asking your customer if they think that they have trouble making decisions is a surefire way to get kicked out of the customer's office or lose that opportunity pretty quickly. So we found a technique in the data that high performers had developed that nobody ever taught them to do this. They just kind of figured that this is how you get indecision on the table, so that you can size it, you can assess it, and you can come up with a plan for how to deal with it. And this technique derives actually from submarine warfare. So we call it pings and echoes. So just like a surface ship, were they to try to detect a submarine in the water, they would send kind of a ping into the water, active sonar, right? It's a sound, quite literally. And what the ship is listening for is the reflection back. And the reflection back tells them, is it a submarine or a whale? Is it a enemy submarine or a friendly submarine? Is it heading forward towards us, away from us? Is it opening its torpedo doors? All the good stuff. And it's the same kind of technique. So in sales, the way this comes across is you want to articulate the fear you think your customer's struggling with, send that ping out, and then listen for the reflection back, but do it in a way that doesn't embarrass your customer. It doesn't make them feel abnormal or out them in any kind of way. So it might be something like this. I might say, Tim, we've had some great conversations. I've been now speaking for a couple of months here. The demos, I think, have gone really well. Please stop me if you disagree, but I think the proof of concept trial we did seems like it rang the bell on all the dimensions you guys care about. And I know we're kind of now shifting from talking about working together to getting something on paper and starting to work together. But I actually, in my experience, this is actually a tricky stage for a lot of customers. And I think that we kind of do this, we don't help here, to be honest with you. I think we put so much in front of you, and we do this a lot because we're proud of what we do. We showed you a lot of different configurations and demos and integrations and all this stuff. A lot of our customers at this point kind of struggle a little bit with what should be in and what should be out of the proposal. And again, we might have made things worse here, but I'd love to ask you, do you and your team feel like right now, based on what you've seen, what we piloted in your organization, you could say what you'd like to see in that proposal and what you're uninterested in having in it, what you want to leave out? And again, I find a lot of customers kind of struggle with that because we're proud of what we do and we show them a lot of stuff and then their eyes get bigger than their stomachs. But what I would love to know is, are you guys clear on what should be in and what should be out? If so, could you share it with me so I can, we can move forward? And if not, I would love to be a resource to you to help you sort through that, because you told me on our very first call, budget is limited, time, resources are limited, you can't have it all. And I would not be doing you a good service if I didn't keep that in mind and try to get us to the configuration that's going to fit your budget, fit your resourcing, all that stuff. Now, so that's my ping.
But that's super empathetic, right? That's super graceful.
It's graceful, and it also tells the customer they're normal, right? Because customers like you struggle with this too. It's not abnormal. And if I suspect right now, like, man, I've had so many calls with Tim and his team, and I just have not gotten a good read. They say yes to everything. They seem to love everything, but that is a recipe for no decision. I know that means this thing's going to cost 10 times more than they have budget for. They're not going to make a decision. So we need to chalk the field and narrow up the solution. But what I've done there is I've made you feel totally at ease and normal. It's empathetic. And what you might say back is something like, you know what? Actually, we were talking about this the other day. We love everything we've seen and we know we can't have it all. And there's a lot of disagreement about what should be and what should be out. Okay, great. Let's talk about that. Or you might say, no, Matt, like, we're just very polite people. There's a lot of stuff you showed us we actually didn't like that much. So right now, let me show you what we want. Okay, awesome. Let's have that conversation. Or you might say, no, I think we're pretty clear on what we want. But I'll tell you what has got us kind of up at night is this business case we've been working on for the CFO. We can't promise a 10x improvement in productivity. Like, I know all your reference customers said they did better than that. I know your case studies on your website are all about, I just have never seen that kind of return here. And I can't have my name on a proposal with that kind of projection. I'll get laughed out of my CFO's office. She'll just say, don't let the door hit you on the way out. There's no way. So I need to put something together that's realistic and achievable. And I need to feel good that what I'm putting in front of it, because it's my name on this, right? So it gets us then into a different place, but that's going to show me, what are you dealing with here? What are you struggling with? How big is that obstacle? And there are going to be times where you might say, off of that ping and that, respond, you might say, you know what, this is never going to happen. And we should just shake hands, be friends. I'll put you in a drip campaign and we'll pick up the conversation at a later date. While as painful as that is, sometimes that's the right decision for a salesperson.
So what you're saying is that you're offering a way in. Like, you're basically saying, create the conversation, be a leader and an expert, insert yourself and take control, but create that conversation, because having that conversation is actually the key to moving forward. And then because you have the other strategies of the JOLT effect, like offering some recommendations, limiting the exploration, you're sort of controlling the other problems that could appear. And then the last one is taking the risk off the table. So as you've mentioned a couple of times, which I think is absolutely fantastic, it's give me some guarantees. How do I know that if we go forward and I press the green button, everything's great now, but where do you go, Mr. Salesperson or Mrs. Salesperson? And will this work? Can you show me? Like, the risk part is just massive.
It's huge. And it's funny in this world we're in today. I think the biggest buzzword we've heard in sales for the past 10 years at least is transformation. Like, every salesperson loves selling transformation because it's exciting, right? It's a big new, like, blue ocean, like, whole new game changer for the customer. The problem is transformation is also expensive, risky, disruptive, and customers get really nervous about this. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword. There's lots of stuff that we see salespeople doing to create that safety net. Now, I think the obvious one is a guarantee. It's an opt-out clause. But a lot of the companies I talk to say, well, we spend so much time and energy and money selling our solution and demoing it and piloting it. We don't give opt-outs. Like, it's pretty rare actually in B2B sales. And consumer, you see it all the time. But In transactional B2B, you see it, but not in sophisticated sales teams. You don't tend not, or sales efforts, solution selling. You tend
It's
not
not
to
a
see.
clause. Yeah.
It's not, yeah, you don't, it's not very common, but that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. There's lots of stuff you can do. So there's a lot of free stuff. So for example, one of the techniques we found that high performing sellers will use is to try to articulate a mutual value plan before the contract is signed. So for instance, let's say, Tim, we've gotten to a proposal together and we've got procurement and legals kind of doing their thing with the agreement. What I might do is say, I know the agreement's not signed yet, but I don't want to lose any momentum here. What I'd like to do with you and your team, Tim, is pull our customer success and implementation folks on the call. I want to introduce you to them. They're going to be working hand in glove with you. And one of the things we want to show you is our roadmap for how we're going to go from signature to value. And this has been built out the 20 years we've been in business. We know how to do this the right way, and we know how to do it the wrong way. Like, we know where the bodies are buried, and we know where the pitfalls are. And so what we can show you is who needs to be involved, what kind of resourcing you're going to need to put in, what we're going to put in, what are the metrics we're going to be tracking, what are the gotchas we need to avoid. And if we follow this, it's literally like a recipe. If we follow this, we are almost guaranteed to overperform relative to what we projected in the business case. Like that's free. That's just good sales hygiene, right? We've heard things like, and this is another one, this is quite interesting as well. A big tech software company that you guys, you would know very well, your listeners would certainly know. They were pursuing a big deal. This was a couple of years ago. And it was a marquee client. They were switching from a competitor, and they were just kind of on the fence and trying to get them over the line for the fiscal year. And one of the things the salesperson did was quite creative. The CEO of this company is a very famous guy. Everybody knows him. He said, look, our CEO personally takes on 4 new customers a quarter, and they're like marquee clients. He's on the quarterly business reviews. He shares his cell phone with the team. If anything, they can text him, whatever. And this is a guy who's like on TV, is like very very wealthy. And that was enough. It was so interesting because that was enough to get them to move forward, because they're like, oh, we can call the CFO on the weekend, or the CEO of this company on the weekend, and he'll answer our question. Okay, like that's a really powerful safety net. Like, he is personally invested in our success. There's other stuff too, though. This starts to cost money, either for the customer or the vendor. But think about like professional services support. So a lot of what we found is, this won't surprise you, high performers sell more professional services support than average performers, but it's the way that they sell it, which is so interesting. It's not just that they're good salespeople, it's that they use professional services almost as an insurance policy. So I might say something to you like, Tim, I know you guys you have a team on your side, you want to implement this yourself. It's one of the great things about our platform. You can do that. We've got all the resources, all the videos, tons of support that you guys can use to implement yourself. However, I know this is a big bet for your company. And I also know that tech implementations don't always go perfectly smoothly. We've all been down that road. So I would encourage us to add a slug of professional services hours to the agreement, just in case things start to slip. Then we'll have the A team lined up. They can come in and get things back on track, and you won't lose any ground. And you know what? If you don't use the hours, we'll roll it into the renewal agreement next year or whenever. That kind of thing, again, you're paying for it, but it makes the customer feel like, you know what, there is this safety net. Things are proper, expectations are properly set. The last one I'll share with you, and this was a little bit, I think, surprising to salespeople, is that one of the best safety nets is actually convincing the customer to buy less or start smaller than they want to. We know customers, like, they'll come in with a specific need, and then they love what they see. It's like walking into the Vegas food buffet, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, holy smokes, look at all this stuff. And your eyes get bigger than your stomach. And customers will start talking themselves into really big things and adding stuff in. And suddenly it's really expensive. And your average performing salesperson's thinking, this is great. Like, I'm going to make President's Club. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to be a hero internally. I'm going to sell this huge deal. But what high performers know is, the bigger that contract gets, the more eyes are on it on the customer side, the greater the likelihood that deal goes south or goes cold. So better to convince the customer to start small and structure the agreement in a way that we can expand rapidly. So I might say, Tim, I know I'd love to sell you that $1 million solution, the all singing, all dancing solution, think we should start a little bit smaller. I'm just going to sound crazy because I'm a salesperson. I get paid a lot more if you bought the big thing. I just want to make sure that we start off in the right way, and then we just get some huge momentum. I want you to look like a hero, not like a fool. And the last thing I want is for you to put your name on $1 million agreement, and then for us to maybe experience some bumps in the road, and then you're under a lot of pressure. Like, I don't want that. I want you to be like, feel like we've contained this. If anything goes wrong, we can pull the plug and it's safe. No harm, no foul. But I think it gives us an opportunity to learn how to work together, for us to learn your environment, for you to learn about us, and then we can expand from there and do it pretty quickly.
Absolutely massive. I mean, these are pearls of wisdom, gems, because again, it's unconventional thinking to think that you'd go smaller, but even when you're saying it, then you can feel it. You can feel that the pressure's been released, and that does again make you more transparent, and it's the right thing to do. In certain circumstances, because actually the deal will be appropriate. It can be expanded quickly, so you've ironed out all the kinks. So if we want to go to $1 million, it's there, but let's do it stage by stage, which is proper. Let's make sure that we deliver on each thing, and then they get that fear met, that need met. I'm not going to mess up. I mean, this has been gold. I think salespeople are going to love this and go out. I mean, they should go out and get the JOLT effect. And obviously, a lot of people have already read Challenger. But Matt, thank you for sharing this with us. I think
thanks for having me, Tim.
Really, really important. And where should people go as well as buying the book, The JOLT Effect? What can they do to engage with you?
So there's a lot of, we have a lot of resources online, jolteffect.com. So you can go, there are a number of tools and resources that were not in the book. So if you like some bonus material, a little bit more kind of how-to and implementation related stuff, go, you fill out a form and download some of the tools from the jolteffect.com. There's also we obviously, our business, we do a lot of training around this. So if you're a sales leader or a manager and you're looking to maybe get your team trained up on some of these JOLT techniques, we have both a kind of an asynchronous self-paced course on our website on jolteffect.com, but we also do a lot of in-person delivery with larger sales teams as well. So if you're interested in that, reach out to us on jolteffect.com. We'd be happy to get you more information.
Matt, beautiful. This has been superb. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate the invite.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for sharing and rating this show. It helps us reach more people and spread the message. That message is the believe it as possible message. I want you to believe in you, believe in the situation, and believe in your bigger life. That's why I created the School of Success. It's a selection of short courses that can help boost your skill acquisition in negotiation, sales, and self-transformation. And I want you to win. I want you to build your empire, the empire of you, and become more. So if you're looking to know how to deal with difficult people, to negotiate at an expert level, to sell, and to become more yourself, to develop your mindset, your confidence, to be able to then think about how to elevate your business, this might be for you. So head on over to the School of Success and look at the links in the show notes and get on over there and check out the short courses that we have for you.